troubled by that. I'm hoping that this will reverse, because I think that the people who are religious and who care about other people and who care about their Creator, they should care about the created. And they should show honor to their Creator by protecting and preserving what has been created and not treating it as it has been treated. So hopefully with education, and this is where all of you fit in, is by helping people to understand this stuff and not feel intimidated by us, but that we're alongside of them trying to explain it. I think gradually some progress can be made. Now I want to get into solutions. We've got to solve two problems at once, and many times solutions are proposed which solve one problem at the expense of the other. I mean, you've heard lately, drill baby drill. Every time you get an extra barrel of oil coming out of the surface of the earth, there's an extra 800 pounds of CO2 being produced. That's that simple. So if you think that's the answer, if you want more CO2, then drill more oil. And that's not even going to solve the oil problem, because they're just, as you saw earlier, there isn't that much. So likely what will happen if business as usual continues is we'll switch from oil to coal, and the rate of CO2 production will actually increase, and we don't want that. Public understanding is the key, and basic science education. I've talked to several of you that are involved in education. You hold the key, working with the young people, helping young minds to understand the basic concepts of energy and understand the concepts of ecology and environment. And they don't have to be experts, but if they can get just the basic understandings. So many people do not understand that energy is a conserved quantity. You convert it, and when you convert it, you lose a little bit to heat, but you don't create energy out of nothingness. And it's amazing how many people think you can create energy out of nothingness. Now, the first thing is to have the right goals. When we went to the moon, there was a simple goal stated that people could easily explain. The goal was that by the end of the decade, some Americans would land on the moon and they'd get back safely. Anyone could have restated that goal. Goals have to be simple, but they also have to be the right goal. I've heard one goal stated that our goal as a nation should be freedom from Middle Eastern oil. Well, that sounds good until you realize the way it works. That can be done all on paper right now, where we get our oil from everybody but the Middle East, and then someone else gets oil from the Middle East, and everybody produces and uses the same amount of oil, and on paper we've made great progress, and some politician can say, when I took office we were getting so much oil from the Middle East and now we're getting none of it, and that's why I need to be reelected. Another goal is U.S. energy independence. So that we don't get energy from outside the country. And that's a little bit more concrete goal, and I think that's a good goal. But one way of doing that is to use coal, lots of coal. Then we don't have to get oil in. What we'll do is we'll use coal to generate hydrogen, so that we can burn the hydrogen in internal combustion vehicles. We don't even have to have fuel cells. Well, the energy efficiency of all that is low, so you'll be burning a great deal of coal. And as I already mentioned, per unit energy, coal has more CO2 production than the other hydrocarbons. And we got to get better, not worse than we are. As a matter of fact, some calculations show that if we really want to take global warming seriously and correct it, we may have to go to negative CO2. In other words, stop throwing all this stuff into the air and start growing a lot of trees that suck it back down. Because that's what nature did. On the average, nature was zero. Sometimes it was positive, sometimes it was negative. And if there weren't those negative times, the times you had positive CO2, the volcanoes and stuff, you wouldn't have, you'd have had a continually increasing CO2 environment, and that wouldn't have worked. So freedom from hydrocarbons is the next goal. That's a very challenging goal. One of the ways you would consider doing that would be to use nuclear power extensively. That does not produce CO2, does not use hydrocarbons. I believe the major problem of going to a nuclear economy is that what we would be doing is saying the United States is going to be nuclear powered, but Iran and you countries over there, you can't have it because you're the bad guys. We're the good guys. We know how to use nuclear energy. Don't talk to the Japanese about that, but we're going to use it, and we're going to be the heroes because we're not polluting, and Iran will continue to burn oil, and they'll be the bad guys. I don't think that that ends up working too well in the big sense. What I think may make sense is, as a goal, and it's the most challenging, most difficult, but the best goal of all, is freedom from any non-renewable energy source. Uranium is not a renewable energy source. As a matter of fact, the total energy content of uranium is something similar to the total energy content of the remaining oil in the Earth's crust. We have a good portion of that uranium in the United States, so that gives us an advantage. But it's not a long-term answer for the planet from an energy point, and there's some downsides, of course, with nuclear proliferation, all of those things. We know about that. The U.S. energy needs, I mentioned before, we use about 4 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity, and this can be reduced. One of the best ways is, instead of generating more electricity, is to figure out how to use things more efficiently. We also would use about 0.85 trillion kilowatt hours of propulsion energy for trucks, all trucks and all cars. And that energy may seem a lot smaller than the fuel energy, but keep in mind, again, that's because of the inefficiency of the gasoline and diesel engines. So this is what we need. This is what the job to do. And you people in Iowa are off to a start with wind power producing some of that electricity. Let me talk about a few energy facts. Oil generates only 1.8% of the electricity in the United States. The oil companies don't want you to know that. They want you to think that electricity comes from oil. If you think that, then you'd say, why would you ever want electric cars? Because it uses oil just at a different place. But that's not true. Electricity generally does not come from oil. As a matter of fact, that 1.8% is mostly Hawaii, and that's going to change. Wind, if the numbers I have is correct, now generates 2.2% of the electricity in the United States. And I've seen numbers from the DOE that indicate we have in the United States a potential of 3 terawatts of wind generation capability. Keep in mind the total generation of electricity, the rating of all of the generators added, is about 1 terawatt. Natural gas production may be near a peak. Now, right now we're seeing prices drop in natural gas. Natural gas costs only 40% as much as oil per unit energy. And there's some new technologies that are bringing in new supplies of natural gas. Definitely natural gas is less of a problem than oil. And T. Boone Pickens' idea of using it to propel vehicles may make sense, especially if he, as he is doing very, very wonderfully, bringing wind power into the utility so that you don't have to use as much gas to power electric utilities. U.S. solar energy resource is many times the need. An area of less than 100,000 square kilometers could power the entire United States, and that's only a few percent the land surface of the United States. A few words about hydrogen. We hear quite a bit about hydrogen, and I do not want to offend anyone. Hydrogen, I believe, however, has been, in some cases, misrepresented. It is not an energy source. It is an energy carrier. And it's the same way electricity is not an energy source. It's an energy carrier. It transmits energy from point A to point B. And it should be compared, therefore, hydrogen should be compared with electricity. It should not be compared with natural gas or coal or oil. And in most cases, when you compare it with electricity, the main thing that stands out is that the energy efficiency is much lower. With electricity, if I start out with energy coming from a wind turbine over here, and I want to send it to you people over there, and you're hundreds of miles apart, I've got 92% energy efficiency. 8% is lost in the grid. If I wanted to use hydrogen to do that same job, you've got a vehicle over here that's going to be electrically powered. You have a fuel cell in that vehicle. Over here, you've got the wind generator, and the wind generator connects to an electrolyzer, which makes hydrogen. We compress the hydrogen. We send it either through a pipeline or through tube trucks. Over here, it's then transmitted into fuel tanks on the vehicle, pressure tanks. When I'm all done, instead of getting 92% of that energy over to you people, I've gotten 20%. So what that means is you need to build a lot more wind generators, and that means it'll be more expensive. And as nice as wind is, everything that we do has some environmental impact, and we want to minimize that environmental impact by maximizing energy efficiency. Biofuels, I think there's a very important place for biofuels, and the place for them, I think, is where as you run out of conventional fuels and the things that electricity can't do. Electricity in batteries can take you in a vehicle 200 miles. It will not fly a 747 across the Atlantic Ocean. And so I think biofuels are going to have a very important place if we figure certain things out. I think they'll have an important place ultimately in aviation, because electricity just won't do it. There's no technology that I know of at this point with electricity that could allow that. And the concern, however, and we all know this, if I have a solar panel, it uses, let's say, 1 square meter of land surface to have a given size solar panel. If I want to produce that same amount of energy with biofuels, I use more than 10 times as much land surface. And that land surface was already in need for agricultural needs. So they're competing. So the ideal way is to kind of manage our resources. If we put wind generators on farmland, we're not taking away any substantial amount of farmland. If we put solar panels on people's roofs, we're not taking away their front lawn. So I think there's an intelligent way of using these things. And use the biofuels. There is a place for them where all else fails. Nuclear fission, as I mentioned before, doesn't emit CO2. It's a domestic source. I also mentioned that there's issues dealing internationally with it that are going to be a problem, foreign policy implications. Now, here's been the promise. This is considered, nuclear fusion, people have said, is the future of energy, and it always will be. People have been working on this since we blew up the Bikini Atoll Island with a large hydrogen bomb. We know that fusion energy is real, unfortunately. We wanted to control this in a contained sense. And we have not, after spending of more than $30 billion, and all these years, we have not been able to do it. I knew Dr. Richard Feynman at Caltech, who was a Nobel physicist. And in his book, he wrote about this, and he said, fusion is difficult, but we will be able to do it. He believed strongly. He was one of the scientists that worked on the Manhattan Project. And so there is still that promise. But we don't have time. The science isn't there yet. And even after the science is there, you've got to do all the implementation. So this is not a near-term answer. The near-term answers are things that you're involved in. And I hope, however, that we get back to getting some of our best minds involved in dealing with the fusion problem. And I said don't rule out cold fusion. I read things in the literature that indicate there may be some reality to it. I won't go into that. But if that is true, that would be the best of all worlds. Battery technology. Lithium-ion batteries seem to be leading the way. They have 7 times the energy storage per unit mass compared to lead-acid batteries. When they started out, we thought they'd be high energy but low power. In other words, we thought they'd be able to take an electric car for a long distance, but it would be a very anemic electric vehicle with low power capability. Lead-acid batteries with 300 watts per kilogram were used in the original General Motors EV1 vehicle that did 0 to 60 in 8 seconds. And now we have 10 times the power-to-weight ratio in these lithium-ion batteries. We're building, in the company I work with, vehicles that do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. And we're not coming anywhere near to using the capability of what lithium-ion batteries can put out. Economics is an issue. They cost $350 per kilowatt hour in high volume production, and as a result they add substantially to the cost of vehicles. There has to be improvement there, and there likely will as we continue to use these. Toyota is planning to use lithium in place of the nickel metal hydride batteries. They're still working, however, on life issues. Battery development. We need to invest money in this. The federal government during the last 8 years put money into fuel cells at the expense of batteries, and I think they had it backwards. Even a fuel cell vehicle uses a battery. And batteries are used all over the place. I have a lithium-ion battery in my pocket. You have